Hi, welcome to another video of Geospinach. Today, we're not reviewing one book, but rather we are reviewing books that have been written in the past decade about modern day Russia. And we're going to do a critique on how to read modern day Russia and understand Russia, and as well as divide them between the good, the meh, and the bad books. Now, starting with the good books, we have The Russian Way of War, Four Structures, Tactics, and Modernization of the Russian Ground Forces. This book has been a very detailed study of the Russian way of war. And what it does, it doesn't rely on assumption, it just relies on clear-cut evidence of what we know on the way that the Russian forces have been trained in the past 20 years, 30 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and how the whole army has structured itself. It's a very good book with a very good structure and a very good narrative for those that are really interested in the way the war is fought within Russia. While the book did overvalue a bit the Russian forces, it's not fault of their own. Every single military analyst and historian has done so since the start of the Ukrainian war. Nonetheless, it's a brilliant book in regards to that asset. Then we have the book Why the Ukrainian Crisis is the Westfall by John Mearsheimer, which John J. Mearsheimer is generally a very good political analyst. While he doesn't specialize specifically about Russia, he is brilliant in regards to geopolitics and the realism school of thought. And he's not a Russophile, and don't get the book wrong, but nonetheless, it clear cuts analyzes why the West has failed in 2014 that pushed Russia too far. And it's quite a very short book, just 30 minutes, so it's just a very short listen. Nonetheless, it's a pretty good book, and it's a critique of Americans and the Western politics from the perspective of the Westerner. Now, going to the meh books, so not the pretty good books, but the average that if you are interested, you should read, but I wouldn't say it's the best. Starting with the first, The Russian Understanding of War, blurring the lines between war and peace. I'm giving this book a 5.5 mainly because it doesn't actually analyzes the actual war or the way the war is fought within Russia, so how the troops are actually trained. What it analyzes is the perspective of the Russian people and the aggression of the West towards Russia using color revolutions, and how the mindset of the Russian people has created an idea that they are expecting an asymmetric warfare from the West to attack them. The book, on the one side, it's a really good book in pointing out some serious facts in regards to the Western mingling of politics within Russian zones of influence and within Russia itself, by putting emphasis on the color revolutions and how those have aggravated the Russian populace to a more aggressive stance, and how the military command of Russia has perceived that as a threat. Nonetheless, the title is very misleading, which that's why I'm giving it quite a low rating. If the title was a bit different and the way the book was advertised a bit different, then I would have given it a bit higher rating. Also, it's a bit biased in some extent. Then we have Losing Military Supremacy, the myopia of American strategic planning. Now, this is not specific about Russia per se, but what it does, it criticizes the West, especially America, on the way it fights its wars, which it is correct in my opinion that the West reliance on over technology will not be its guarantor of victory. On the other hand, it completely misunderstands the Russian way of war, like completely and utterly misunderstands it. And the author, in my opinion, kind of gets diluted, delusioned by Russian and Chinese propaganda. So this book is not good to understand Russian uh, success in warfare, but rather the failures of the West in warfare. Now, going to the bad books about Russia. Now, starting with the first one, which I really didn't like this book, Creating Russophobia, from the Great Religious Schism to Anti-Putin Hysteria. Now, this book can easily be classified as Russian propaganda. And the reason I'm pissed off with this book is because it touches on a subject that I'm really keen on, which is Russophobia. And Russophobia is something that exists within the West. And the author is right in arguing that the underlying politics of the West are anti-Russian and have been for the past 30 years, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in that aspect only, the author is correct. Nonetheless, the author completely manipulates dates and so forth to prove his point, while a huge some of the things he's saying are correct. He portrays the whole thing like the West is just trying to destroy Russia, which is not accurate at all. The West has a general using soft power politics to influence Russia heavily, and it has done so in the past, but it has done so across the world, not only to Russia. There is in general Russophobia, and we've seen that Russophobia has massively risen in the past 2-3 years, and we are tracking everything that has to do with Russia and not the governance of Russia, the ones that are actually causing the problems, which this is the issue that should be of concern, but the author takes that away and creates something like a propaganda. Nonetheless, it has some arguments there that have some credence and they're actually factual arguments. Nonetheless, I don't find it a good book at all. Then we have Putin, Prisoners of Power by Dasha Litsina and Russell Finch. It's a bad book. The authors have like no fundamental understanding of the history of Russia. It's like what they do is use high school education understanding of history of Russia and just say the facts by making grand assumptions, completely ignoring the culture of Russia. How can you write a book about politics of modern day Russia by ignoring the culture of Russia? You're just writing it completely from a Westernist perspective, which is factually wrong. The book is just a terrible book to read. Well, the facts within the book are not necessarily wrong. I'm not saying the facts are wrong. So if the authors say this, your facts are correct. It's just, it really feels like a whole cherry picking operation with a complete misunderstanding of fundamentals of Russian culture, such as the why does not Russia votes for Vosh leaders? Why do they have this clientelistic network? What is the importance of this network and thus Russia to become an oligarchic system? These are the fundamentals that should have been looked upon, and this book fails completely. Now, some notes on how to read Russia, yourself. Now, to best understand modern day Russia, in my opinion, you should completely avoid modern day books about Russia. You should first understand the story of Russia to truly understand what's happening right now within Russia, which in my opinion is a tragedy. I am not supporting Russia in its war. I find the war one of the biggest failures of Russia, as we have seen. Nonetheless, to understand Russia, it's not between a competition of good and evil. So I will argue the best historians to give you a perspective of Russia, the top of the top, Orlando Figes, in every single of his book, does a brilliant job. Then a few books in regards to Stalin, like from Oleg Vinkluvnik, and the Stalin, the Court of the Red Tsar by Simon Sebag Montefiore, where Montefiore is also a brilliant historian that wrote many other books that are also pretty good. And this is very important for you to read if you want to understand the concept of the Vosh and the dictatorship behind Russia, and how the leaders within Russia abuse their power and how they abuse their power to succeed what they succeed. Then again, you should read Montefiore to understand the Romanovs, how Russia became modern day Russia, the complexes, the cultural complex that the Russian people possess in their idea that they are both European and Asiatic, the way the Romanovs ruled Russia and how they influenced the whole culture of Russia. And then The King of the Hill, the best books about Russia to understand the failure of the system, and not only the Russian people, but in communism in general, but communism and Russia now comes to be synonymous. The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I will argue the best way to read him is to read the abridged version. If you truly like it, then read the 3 volumes separately. Then before you move on, you should read a few books. That I just have 2 books here about the Russia at war in World War II. There are many. I just didn't went into the process of writing all of them, but World War II plays a very important role in Russia. Actually, Russia has a concept of the Great Patriotic Wars. The Napoleonic Wars, what is the Great Patriotic Wars, the First World War, then the Civil War, then the Second World War. This idea of how the Russian people come together and the idea that Russia cannot lose. This is inherent to the culture of the Russian people. As Napoleon has said, a Russian soldier knows how to die. This context, this point is very fundamental for everyone to understand what it means to be a Russian. And then I'm just pointing out some very important World War II historians that also partially cover Russia: Ian Kershaw, Max Hastings, Anthony Beaver, Simon Sebag Montefiore, and actually many more. That it's good for you to read the Cold War in extension to understand how Russia was ruled and how it changed between the Stalinist way of governments to a more liberal a bit through Khrushchev, and then the complete collapse through Brezhnev, leading to Gorbachev and the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the more you read, the more you understand how that culture works. Thank you for watching. This has been a very short summary. If you want more specific book reviews on more specific topics in regards to Russia specifically, please do comment below. And thank you for watching. Have a good day.